Bom dia. Before I start, I thought I would just say it is fantastic to be in Brazil. I love your country. I've been to Rio and Salvador. This is my first time
It's
in
really
Sao
terrific
Paulo.
to be here. Thank you for coming.
I'm going to talk a little bit about innovation at Google, which is a really amazing thing to talk about because our company has, in a lot of ways, helped redefine innovation over the past decade. And we want to get you under the hood, so to speak, of how we do that. And hopefully, at the end of these remarks, you'll leave with some concrete things that you can take back to your own organizations to help drive innovation and creativity. So to dive in, I'm starting with the challenge because innovation is really, really difficult. And Clay Christensen, who is a professor at Harvard Business School, wrote a famous book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And he tried to capture why it's so difficult to drive innovation on a continuous basis. And he had three primary factors that he put forward to describe this dilemma, and I'm going to summarize those here. The first is sustaining technologies are different than disruptive technologies. So as we think about innovation, it's incredibly important to ground us in what is incremental improvement on what we do versus big, transformative, disruptive things that reset the bar. That's the first. The second is the notion of the pace of progress moving more quickly than how the market interprets that progress and those needs. So this is a fancy way of saying that consumers are often way, way ahead of us as leaders, as marketers, and we get in our own world and sometimes forget that there are these amazing dynamics that are happening. There's a pace of change that is incredibly dramatic that we may not necessarily see because we're in the context of our own organizations. Which leads to the third point, the structure of organizations, companies, have a significant impact on the investments they make, the choices they make. So structure matters. I'm going to talk a lot about the Google culture. Culture matters. All of these things inform our ability to drive innovation as organizations. So this is the dilemma that we face in confronting innovation. And then there are the odds that everyone is aware of, that X% of all new Y fail. I'm not sure what the statistics are in Brazil, but certainly in the US, roughly 90 to 95% of all new business ventures fail. The manifesto has three key points. Innovators beat ideas, prototypes beat product types, and I'll explain what a prototype is in a few minutes, and data beats opinion. So let's start with innovators beat ideas. Ideas are incredibly enticing. Everyone loves ideas. Ideas, though, are tricky. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to dispel a little bit of the importance on ideas. Because in our experience, yes, you need ideas. Ideas need to come from many different places, but it's really they're not necessarily automatically associated with innovation. So you probably have all seen things like this: ideas, ideas, ideas. We need some innovative ideas. Where's the next billion-dollar idea? I have an idea that will change the world. Everyone has ideas. We're swimming in ideas. But that's not necessarily innovation. Another famous idea, and that's the question, is it really or was it really a famous idea? This is a picture of the first light bulb that was invented by Thomas Edison. And what's interesting about the light bulb is it really wasn't about the idea. And if you step back and try and think about how you would conceptualize what the light bulb ultimately ended up being, we have a few examples there of potential types of ideas. But it actually wasn't about the idea at all. So Joseph Swan, actually Thomas Edison was not the first to come up with the idea of an incandescent light bulb. In fact, the first patent filed for this idea was by a man named Joseph Swan in the UK. And that idea was patented in 1850. Thomas Edison founded his company in 1878. So literally 28 years later. And during that entire period of time, people were working on this concept and this idea. When Thomas Edison founded his company in 1878, it took him another 2 years before he actually produced the first working light bulb. And that required roughly testing 3,000 different theories about how you can make this work. It also involved thousands and thousands of tests on materials. So the filament inside of a light bulb is incredibly sensitive, and it took a long, long time to figure out what material would work. So the point here is that ideas are important. They're the spark, they're the inspiration, but they don't equate to innovation. Innovation is really about that 99% that's reflected in the picture of the hard, hard work. Thomas Edison toiling day in and day out in his basement trying to figure this out. That's really what innovation is. And the big point that we want to do is to shatter this obsession with ideas and focus on innovation. And the point is, if you want innovation, don't actually look for ideas like light bulbs. You really want to look for innovators. You want to look for the Thomas Edisons of the world. And strategically at Google, that's what we focus on. We hire people and we cultivate talent that has an accumulated experience base and evidence of bringing to market innovative ideas, and people who are going to invest in that 99% to take ideas to fruition. And that's an incredibly important. And so we have this notion of building the right it versus building it right. A lot of organizations focus on the building and building it right and getting it perfect, and not being confident that they have the right it. They have the right idea, the right crux of opportunity to invest in. On the manifesto, data beats opinions, which should be pretty straightforward. So are you building and are you on the right track? Are you building the right it? And there are different levels of credibility, right? So we talked about the idea, which is low. We all know the web van versus Twitter, the false positive versus false negative. If you have the prototype, that gives you a little bit more confidence that what you're building is realistic. The best way to drive credibility around an idea and to make sure that you're building the right it is usage data. So our engineers and at Google, we have this notion of a hit or a flop, and that's connected to the prototype. And a flop is a failure in launch operations or premise. And the way that you figure out a hit versus a flop is to take that prototype and get some very quick information to understand how successful it's likely to be. So you run experiments. We run experiments all the time. So we invite people to use the new thing, the new it. We then monitor how many people try it. And then, importantly, we monitor how many people continue to use the it over a period of weeks. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And we look at the curve, and we understand the drop-off at each of those individual stages, because that will help us understand whether or not that we're building, whether or not it's going to stick and be effective with the audience that we're producing it for. So a few examples. This is a pets.com sock puppet, which you can see lots of people invited to join, huge drop-off, people who tried it, clearly a flop. Lest you think that everything that we do is successful at Google, we have lots of flops, and we're fine with that. We actually take the learning from those flops and apply it to other areas. So this is Google Wave, which some of you may have been exposed to. Google Wave, we were incredibly excited about Google Wave. We introduced it, lots of people tried it clearly, but what we found was that very few people continued to use it. It did not have the uptake or the stickiness to make it a hit. And so we moved away from Wave, and again, took that learning and are applying that to different areas. So lots of reasons to believe, a tremendous amount of innovation and inspiration that actually drives us on a daily basis. What I thought I'd finish up with is hopefully a few learnings or ideas that you might take back to your own organizations based on this framework. And I thought what I'd do is start with the marketers to bring this home a bit, because it's very easy to stand up and talk about all these great things that we're doing at Google. What should you do tomorrow, or how can you put into practice some of those learnings? So for marketers, and thinking about the manifesto, one idea is to really rethink the way you go to market and how you develop products, that product development cycle. Because the world is very different and things are moving so quickly. So this notion of prototyping is an interesting one to bring to your own product development efforts. Replacing yearly planning with real-time playbooks. So marketers are famous for building these long-term marketing plans that extend over a year. And of course, this is important to do. We all have our promotional drive times, the results that we have to deliver on a quarterly basis. What we're finding is that the most aggressive marketers are in many ways abandoning these long-term planning cycles from a marketing perspective and focusing on playbooks. So these very, very focused ways of responding to the market in real time, based on what competitors are doing, based on what your target audience is saying in the social graph. All of these things are pushing against trying to be too structured, again, focusing too much on building it right, as opposed to making sure you have the right it to begin with. For me, and is all of the opportunity that's here in Latin America, particularly in Brazil. I think that your region and your country specifically, you have all of the fundamentals to help redefine the way we think about marketing and the connection that consumers have with technology, because you're huge, you're at scale, there's tons of creativity here, but you have the advantage of being able to take the learnings from other markets like the US, like Europe, and iterate on those learnings and actually come out ahead. So my call to action for all of you is to be the innovation incubator for the world. Obrigado.